Hello everyone, welcome back to the Building Performance Hub podcast. Today I have someone who I met a long time ago, but I suspect doesn't remember me coming to your office over in Essex with a sales guy. This is Tony Battle. Tony has spent most of your career, almost all of your career at a building company. I don't know if you want to mention them or not.
Absolutely.
Kind & Co. Good builders, and Tony is someone I've admired from a distance for a long time, and it's good today to actually get somebody on from the contractor side, because I want to hear from the contractor side a little bit about the industry and the building performance, because you were there, you were running the show kind of as air testing became mandatory 2006, and I want to talk about that, because you must have been thinking as a contractor, what is this thing? What is this test? When was the first time you saw an air tightness test?
I'm not sure if I ever did see an air tightness test. Sadly, my role was more office bound and out meeting clients and trying to convince them that the construction industry isn't what you see on Channel 4, the builders from hell. There are people out there who purport to be builders who aren't. And that's always a constant struggle for the industry. So it's taken my mission, along with driving the business forward and getting work and employing people and paying their mortgages. Because effectively that's what I saw my role as within Kind of Company when myself and my joint MD, Bill, when we finally bought the business or had bought into the business. It was suddenly realised for me that while it's construction I'm also responsible for tens of mortgages.
Yeah.
And that weighed more heavy on me than anything else, that every decision we made within that business had to be right, because there were tens of mortgages depending on us making the right decision. So that pressure was immense at times. But it was one you had to push at the back of your mind, otherwise you wouldn't make a decision. So when the technology came along, it was the guys that were on the shop floor, if you like, who were dealing with that. Our projects managers, our design coordinators, they were the people dealing with it. So I saw it, and from, if you like, second hand.
Yeah, you heard about it.
But they gave me the information and said, this is what we're doing now. And quite rightly, as you said, when it all came in and we had to do it, it was a case of how do we do it best? Because Kind of Company, established in 1945, we've seen so many changes. Thankfully, I wasn't there in 1945, or else I'd be a lot grayer and older than I look now. So the business developed over the years, but it always had. And one of the reasons I joined the business, I was told when I was after an interview in 1989 by the business, they said it's a good company. So at that stage, the business was known. Kind of Company were a good company.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, if they're a good company, then that's the company I want to work for. So I did. And like old Remington, as they say, I liked it so much I bought it. But that's rather making it sound a lot better than it is. It took a long time to get there. So that information, and as we developed this business, it came with it. And when I got into the position of being a joint MD, it was my role then to say to people and explain to them that Kind of Company are a good business, and still are, despite the fact that I retired in June 2023. And that was, again, to let the business continue to be a good business and grow. Yeah. If I was there, I was a glass ceiling. There was no need for me to be a glass ceiling anymore. There were some really good guys in there and girls in there who knew and wanted to drive the business forward. And I was given my opportunity to drive the business forward, and I did from 2001, 2002, when I became a director, to the point I finished. And I'm still very passionate about Kind of Company, as I've just rambled on about.
No, that's good.
But now there's new things in my life, and there's new passions about construction in general. Things that I can say now, because I'm no longer an owner of a construction business. But I can reflect on my career and talk openly and honestly to people around me.
No, that's great. I think to touch on a very early point, you started as a quantity surveyor, did you? Your QS?
Yes.
Was that your entry into construction?
It was. I did my university education in Dublin, in Bolton Street College of Technology, as it was then. It's now a fancier title. And I did a broad brush, which was building, technical, QS, law, economics.
Oh, so I wish that existed now.
Well, indeed, and I do say that when I come up against people, not against people, wrong phrase. When I dealt with people through my career, they had very limited understanding. Where the construction industry, people say the construction industry isn't brain surgery. Well, I would suggest that if it isn't, it's a very close neighbour. The amount of moving parts that's in construction is incredible, and we as contractors have to manage that, no matter what size you are. But if you manage it well, the product is a success. If you manage it badly, the product isn't a success. No difference. So that broad brush education I got in Bolton Street served me well. Came to the UK in 88. Was interviewed, 89, was interviewed, had a job for 9 months with an Irish company, decided that I needed to move on because I was almost stereotyped, and then joined Kiney Company. And from that point on, yes, came in as a quantity surveyor, worked my way through, became a projects manager, became a director, became an owner, became retired.
Yeah, great career. And you achieved some really cool projects in that time. I had a look back on your website before we did the podcast, and I was flicking through from the time where I kind of was with Kyneco as a subcontractor, trying, battling and winning jobs. And I'm looking at some of the projects and remembering, God, that was a tough one. That was that was on a really tiny little corner site, and then there was another one. You go, well, yeah, that was a decent sized project. I can only imagine, and this is kind of why I want to get you on to talk about, because you mentioned construction being, like brain surgery. I think to some extent it's more than that, and to have somebody like you that was at the top of the chain and responsible for must be a million moving parts in order to build a block of flats. Just think how many individual components and people and trades and subcontractors and subcontractors and legal and finances go into that. Is absolutely astonishing when you do think about it. So I guess we'll start off with a slightly amusing high-end question: is why would you want to be a building contractor? Why would you want to do that role? What is it? Just something you fell into naturally from the college, or is it just something natural career path? You join a company and you move up through the managing ranks.
Interesting question. I have no family background in construction. Some might argue I still don't know anything about construction, but that's another story. I think it was just it just happened for me. It was just I went to university. I thought, what am I going to do? I wasn't an engineer. I knew that. I was more construction. Don't know why, but I was. And then that just evolved. And then in university, then I felt, actually, this is where I should be. I'm going to be better in the office than I am on site. I can fit a kitchen, but I wouldn't make a living at it. I've hung doors, but again, I wouldn't make a living at it. So I thought, well, what can I do? And in that process, so I became a cog in a wheel, and that's what construction is. It's a number of cogs in a wheel, and so long as every cog is doing its bit, then it works. And when you say, and I think that's, thank you very much, and saying that I'm up there and all these moving parts and I'm in control of them, then I'm not in control of them. The people that are in control of them are the people that work with me. And I'm a very firm believer in people working with me in opposed to for me. I've never asked anyone to work for me. I want them to work with me. And that's what construction is about. It's a band of brothers and sisters. So we have there's this immense number of people, as you said, from the manufacturers in whatever country they're in, done their part. That product is supplied to us. We install it. I'm not a plumber. I'm not an electrician. So it's all those people. So I'm relying on everyone around me to do their part. And I see my job is making sure that I facilitate that need or that ability and to do what they're doing. And in my case, it's saying to them, here I am, here's Kiney Company, here's a construction company, this is what we do, and this is what we do well.
Yeah.
And why would you not come to us? And I reference again the Builders from Hell. That is a shocking indictment, and the industry is not about that. That is not the industry.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that twice. I think that's clearly something that you think about. I think it's a shame on the construction industry. What do you think we could do to stop those types of just bad contractors? What do you think we could do? If I could click my fingers and change something, would it be a law that let me throw it out there in a different way. Should building contractors be licensed specifically to be a building contractor? What are your thoughts?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's happened. I think we've actually got something now that's akin to that, or is going to move us into that. Sadly, Grenfell happened, and we all know the consequences of that. And many, many years later, like lots of reports, it's come out. But with Grenfell came the Building Safety Act. Now, the Building Safety Act within it had a number of things that I think will help the industry. And one is they talk about competency. So they're asking people, saying it's not good enough to just turn up and say, here I am. We all know the CSCS cards, that's fine. That gives you a certain level. You can walk on site, you can do things. It was about health and safety. Where we're saying now, are you competent to do what you're doing? Where is your competency level? So that's part of coming with the Building Safety Act. The other thing is, it's brought us in a thing, and it's almost making it mandatory, and I'm sure people can correct the podcast if I'm quoting it wrong here, but it's saying we want collaboration. We want you to collaborate. Yeah. We want you to be early engaged. Now, all of those things, if you are a rogue trader, you're not going to be interested in any of that. You don't need to be confident. You just need to bluff your way through Mrs. Miggins, who says, here I am, I'm going to do this. And so long as that's your base level of someone to convince, you can do it. But when you're actually a professional, and that's what the industry is, it's a highly professional industry, they'll need to be able to demonstrate competency. They'll be happy to engage early, and they'll be happy to collaborate. And in that world, that's when we move on. That's when the Performance Hub comes into it. It's about that ability to be able to demonstrate that you can do things. But then we must consider price. And price could be the downfall of a lot. We all know the cost of everything, but we don't know the value of anything. That's what it comes down to. Well-used phrase. So how do we deal with that? And that, I'm not saying that I have the answer to that, but I do think in a collaborative, early engaged environment, that can be handled, because you'll see the benefits of some of the things. As I left the business, we embarked on the Lunenburg Newham's passive home program. And I'm going to see in January one of the last buildings that we're going to hand over. They're all blocks of flats, they're all concrete. Dare I say a passive purple? I'm sure there'll be a link to there.
Alex will be laughing because the
purple
walls in the background.
We saw that that product. We saw it. We thought, this is what can this do? Will this help us? It did. So we were building masonry, unlike timber frame, where I'm more of an advocate for that, certainly in housing. But in that environment, we developed and we embraced that. And again, testimony to kind of company. We had a no blame culture was brought in when you were building, and that was because of the design manager that came to the business and said, right, there's only 3 things you have to remember about passive. And we thought, excellent, only 3. We can handle that. Quality, quality, quality. That was his that. And he said, that's what it's all about. And I thought, well, that sits well with kind of company, because that's the sort of contractor we are. Now, some may argue, but I believe that's the case. So when we were doing that, we said there had to be no blame. Air leakage was the big thing. How do we get air tightness? If someone drills a hole, does something by accident, if they're covered up, world's worst thing that could happen. And that's what's explained to us. So we said, right, well, how do we deal with that? How we're going to do it is no blame. So if you drill something or you do something, and then part of the induction is we talk about air tightness and the fact that we're trying to achieve passive standards. So that was drilled in at the very beginning. And I'm going to go back, and even though I'm no longer part of the business, I still want to see, because I was there at the beginning, I want to see how it happened. And the question I'm going to ask is, how did that work? Did it work? Did people believe they weren't going to be blamed? Yeah. And did it work for us? I know 2 of the buildings were handed over, fully certified from the Passive Institute of Germany. Excellent. So we must have done something right.
Yeah.
And we're now 100 plus passive homes under our belt.
That's absolutely incredible. So that you've gone from building, you kind of gone the journey, even in just, if you take just the last, say, 25 years, how as a business you went from building the standard stuff, great stuff, through to now building Passive House. It's an incredible journey, and I appreciate you're steering the ship. You're not running the ship, but at some point you must have looked at the project that must have come across your desk, and someone said, "We've got an opportunity to bid to build some passive houses here." What was your first thought? Just straight no, or
Absolutely,
is it this is a challenge I'm willing to take on?
Absolutely not. We could see that's where the industry was going. That's where legislation was going. Passive was coming in. I was aware of passive, and I thought this is good in all aspects. Because again, the industry has this perception, just looks after itself. But we're such a huge component in the UK economy. We employ lots of people. If you want to get money into the economy quickly, you do infrastructure, you do building. Guys still live, on a week-to-week basis. It's straight into the economy. So there's very few industries in the UK that actually have that ability to deliver quickly. But unfortunately, there's a tap, turn on, and turn off exercise and all. If the government's not sure, we were talking earlier and we mentioned COVID, and we said, right, what happened in COVID? Well, the world shut down. Everybody retreated. It was great if you could work with a computer, but it wasn't if you were on a construction site, because we were expected to still turn up to work. So we still had to get in the car, get on the train, get to site and build and stay 2 meters apart. It's very hard to carry things if they're heavy and they're not 2 meters long. Yeah. And 2 people have to carry them.
We'll jump back to the passive question, but COVID you raised there, and it's one of the questions that I had on my list. So the day the lockdown happened, the day it was Boris, wasn't it, that came onto the telly and said, "Stay in your homes. We don't know. It's not that it's bad. It's not that it's there's not going to be a huge death rate. We just don't know. So we want to shut you down." And everybody went home. And we've got the numbers in our lodgement system, and we can see on the graph when you put it by day, nothing happened. People lodged tests that they'd already done, but actually, if you look at the date of test, we had nothing for maybe 2 weeks or so, and then they creep in, and the government comes out pretty quickly and says the construction industry is safe to continue. We still don't know what it is. We still don't know if it's going to kill people, but we think it's going to affect those people that have underlying health conditions, that are overweight or that are older. That's the current information that we have. And as you know, that's that's a chunk of the construction industry. I speak for myself. So what were your thoughts as a business owner, somebody who potentially then is responsible for the sites, not necessarily running the sites, but responsible for them, to have subcontractors on the site and supposedly keeping 2 meters apart, ventilated spaces? Did that scare you? Was that a concern from your point of view?
It was very scary. Something I've never experienced. No one's ever.
No one has,
in my lifetime experienced that. I remember leading up to it, you could see the press was heading in that direction, that we're going to shut the country down. And I thought, well, what does that mean? What does that mean? And we talked about it in the office, and we thought, well, I'm not quite sure. We need guidance. So Boris, came on the TV that night and said, right, this is it. We're shutting down. We're going to close the country down for 2 weeks, and that's going to be the stop break, and that will help, and all the rest of it. And irrespective of what you think and what we know subsequent to that decision, we came into the office the next day. The board met, and we said, right, what do we do? So our responsibility was for our staff and for everybody, and that includes all our subcontractors, our supply chain. So we said, right, go home. So the guys in the office, take whatever you need, take your computers, just go home. We're not sure yet what we're going to do, but we've got 2 weeks, and that's what we've been told to do, so that's what we're going to do. So we shut the office down for 2 weeks, we shut all the sites down. And then we continue then in at a socially distanced space, normally over the phone, as to what we would do next. And we looked for direction. This was science. This was apocalyptic. It was. What is this? Are we all going to finish?
I think a lot of people forget, because we look back with the knowledge that we now know, that there wasn't. There was a lot of people that died, but the death rates weren't as expected.
No.
You know, it wasn't quite as bad as we'd assumed. The mutations weren't as devastating as we thought, and it didn't kill, you know, 1 million people like we were first told. And I think a lot of people look back and kind of judge, but they forget at the time the information we had was almost zero. It was this virus is going to kill people.
Yes.
It's going to kill a lot of people.
Yeah, it was the end of the world.
Yeah.
That was, yeah, even if you're a skeptic, you just thought, this is, you know, how are we going to, we're going to turn out the lights. Everyone go home. UK, everyone go home. You know, you could walk down the street. I did. I walked down the middle of the road just because I could. And I thought, when we were allowed out for our 1 hour walk, I thought, this is crazy. And you have these visions of horror movies that you watch where everyone has gone in zombies and all the rest of it. It was just very strange. But we you know, during that 2 weeks, things started to reply. We then figured out that, yes, the construction industry, for some strange reason, clearly we were all immune to COVID. Yeah. We were expected to continue.
If you've used a Portaloo, you're probably going to be okay.
Exactly. Yeah, self-inflicted.
Yeah.
So we came back and we put emergency procedures in place. We brought in new additional toilets and social distancing, more rooms for the canteens, etc. We brought all those things in. We thought this is what we should do, so we did. And we managed it. Sadly, and you hear these anecdotal stories, you know, someone sitting there in their nice flat looking out the window at a construction site and seeing 2 guys that are carrying something and they're closer and they're ringing the HSE saying, there's 2 guys and they're closer than 2 meters. I mean, that was just frustrating.
So that happened. People,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you just think, well,
but there was such panic in the world, wasn't there? We just didn't know.
Yeah. But I mean, heaven forbid, I didn't. And it's I was in a fortunate position where I wasn't travelling to London, but the tube still ran, and they were full of construction workers.
Yeah.
You know, so you again, looking in hindsight now, it was a bad flu, it was this, that, and the other, but it did kill people, and we didn't know at the time. So you know, we pushed on through it. But yeah, it was a worry. I'm sure it was a worry for every business owner who employed people, who had to work in close proximity to each other. It wasn't just the construction industry, but there was time. We were out there. We continued. We lived through it. We're out the other side of it now, and you know, it is what it is. Can't turn back time. I wouldn't want to revisit it. Definitely not.
No, I think we're still paying the national debt for it, and will be for a while.
Well, indeed.
That's a politics podcast.
But is that not having an impact on the construction industry as we speak right now?
It does. I think my biggest concern from COVID is we never, at the time, panic, and we improved our hygiene. I think we've slipped straight back into where we were. I don't think anything has really changed in terms of how outside of the construction industry, just human beings live their day-to-day lives. I think incredibly we've just slipped straight back into where we were, and I don't know whether that's a concern or not. It's something that I do think about when you get onto a tube train in the middle of Oxford Street, and you know there's 12,000 people crammed onto one tube train, and you're sardines. I think we've not taken what we've done. We don't see the changes in air quality. We don't see a lot of existing buildings being improved or changed. We just kind of slipped back and went, we'll wait for it to happen again. So heaven forbid in my lifetime it ever happens again. But I feel some lessons maybe, unless do you feel the construction industry learned lessons or changed, or are we back to square one?
I'd say there are some learnings that we've taken forward from it, but they've now become part of the norm, and therefore, because they're part of the norm, we don't maybe focus or acknowledge them as much. Definitely, you know, facilities on site. And it was always a demand, this is what it should be, this is the minimum requirement. But I think there's probably more than the minimum requirement now, and people have an expectation. And again, that's part of this whole perception of the construction industry. You turn up, a drying room, is there for a reason. There's lockers on site. There's eye protection. So when you go on, and even in the washrooms, there's emergency if something splashes in your eye, it's there. All the equipment is there. There's even tests on site saying, if you're dehydrated, this is what your emissions should look like on the wall. So there's all them sort of things. Back when I started, that just, you're a roughy tough to builder, get on with it. You sit in a bag of dust and you eat your sandwich and all the rest of it. That's gone. So we have moved forward. The improvements now are probably more, they're They'll be smaller rather than the big changes we've made. And that's for the professional builders, professional contractors. They will see them. The other chaps, they'll always be sitting on a bag of dust eating a sandwich.
Yeah.
And that's life.
And we're starting to see some pretty nasty illnesses akin to the asbestos scandal we now have the silica scandal. So the cutting of the silica worktops, people now having lung problems. And I think, we need to think about, just because it's not a problem now, could that be a problem in the future? Are we breathing something we don't want to be breathing? And think about it. It might not be recognised now, but think about it.
Yeah, but now you wouldn't do that on a professional site. You'd have ventilation. You'd make sure it was in the open. Hats, gloves, goggles, all the things you see on the outside of the site. That's real. That gets enforced. That's why inductions to site are so important, because it's just to make sure. And I know that we still have a multi-language site. So the symbols that we use and how we tell people where things are dangerous, how we explain things, that's all evolved, and it's now very straightforward for people to understand that. And I'm sure any professional contractor out there would be employing all those things now. But they've all just crept up. No one sees them as big changes. They've all just happened incrementally.
Interesting way to think about it. I think one of the most important things from back when I was visiting different sites daily is when you walk onto site, the site manager sets the tone. They set the tone of the business. So you walk on, if you walk on, the site manager goes, plot 23, there's the keys, crack on. Then I think you are likely to see problems. And if you walk on and they say, before you do anything, we need a quick chat, induction, here are the risks, this is what's going on today. You really set the tone or you have the tone set for you about your expectations on this construction site. And that's something I noticed when I was out visiting sites every day for the best part of 10 years. From day one, it was park at the door and do what you want, right through to now. Yes, I know inductions aren't fun, they aren't clever, but they are necessary. And the ones that do them, I think the sites are substantially better controlled. And if there's any site managers listening, then kudos to you if you're one of those people that that sets the tone early, because it really does make a difference.
And make them proportionate.
Yeah.
A guy who's coming on the site to work, isn't a tradesman, they'll get a different induction to someone who's coming as a visitor.
That's a great shout, because there are times when, as air testers, that was the air and sound testers, we were going on to finished sites. I mean, genuinely, you'd have a terrace of houses, driveways in, gardening all done, flowers, and they'd be talking to you about all sorts of weird and wonderful problems that we're in a finished home.
Yeah.
The biggest issue I've got is if I fall down the stairs myself. So that it is proportionate. It's actually quite good.
And that's why when the professionals come to site, and they should come more often, and clients, it's you go with a site manager, they'll take you around. You are protected. You're in a protected zone, but there's a bubble around the site manager and whoever he sends with you that effectively protect you. So you don't need to know all of this stuff, because we're not going to let you pick up the dust. We're not going to let you do this. You're going to be protected. So it's proportionate, and get them out there and let them see. And the more clients that come to site, the better, in my view, because then they'll really appreciate the efforts that are gone into building what we're building for them.
Yeah. I'm going to drag you back to the Passive House project being put across your desk.
Yes.
What were your first thoughts on that? Did you use it as an opportunity to say, we're going to need to do this at some point, let's use this small project as a chance to learn? Or did you look at it and go, financially, commercially, this makes sense, let's go for it? Or somewhere in between? Was it an opportunity, or is it a risk, or it just fit at the right time, the right trades and the right staff around you to think you could pull it off?
Well, indeed, yes, pull it off. That's a good expression.
It's tricky.
Yeah. So, because I was aware of passive, and I thought, as I said, it's coming down the line. This is going to happen to us. I spoke to people who were in the industry. Again, part of my job is out there, trying to gain that knowledge. What's coming around the corner? So while it was there, I thought, right, well, I know we're a good contractor. I know we can build well. Therefore, all the passive is asking you to is to build well. There's some products that we have to use, and there's some technology and we have to do the air testing a bit more rigorously. But it's only asking you to do what you have been doing, but do it better. And I thought, well, that's not a challenge, because I think we can do that. And back to the Noble M culture, something small like that makes a big difference. So I wasn't worried about it, but it's easy in my ivory tower, as some might say, well, you didn't have to do it. I know, but I had the confidence, again, back to the cog in the wheel. If my cog is to say, I think we can, and then give the tools and encouragement to all the other cogs to say we can, then we will. And that's what I think where it comes down to. It's so easy to say, point out. Everyone in life is a critic. Everybody can criticize. It's the easiest thing in the world to do. But you stand up there and say, actually, this is what I'm going to do. And okay, if it doesn't go well, then it doesn't go well. But that's only the first time. Second time, it should go better. But when we had the Passive Institute, we had a very good designer, Passive House designer for us, and we brought him in. He sat down. We had the site manager, the projects manager, the surveyors, the people. Even though they weren't physically doing it, they had to understand what was going to be required, and the fact that it was going to cost a little bit more because someone had to spend a little bit more time doing something. But the outcome is what we're looking at. What's the outcome of that? And the outcome of that is a well-used phrase, fuel poverty. There's a reason. We're trying to. That air tightness means less space heating, means less energy required in the building, and we're all worried about the world and what we're burning, fossil fuels, etc. Well, if we can use less requirement for heating, less fossil fuels burnt, is that not a good thing? Now, what's that got to do with a kind of company based in Leytonstone in London? It might have nothing to do with us, but actually I think it does, because if every little cog in that big cycle does their thing, it'll all add up to something.
Yeah.
Now, real dream worlds, but that's the world I lived in and still do.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. I want to ask you a question about cost, because there's a perception about contractors that it's all about cost. Cost is everything. You can manage your cost, cheapest build, more profit, board of directors, driving Ferraris, you push down, everyone has to have the cheapest price. In that context, if I was to make that statement, if I was to sit here on the podcast and say, building contractors are all about cost, what would your response be to me without hitting me?
I'd agree with you. I would say we are all about cost. But I would phrase it differently than the way you've just phrased it. But the reason we're all about cost is because that flows down from the people who are signing the checks.
Yeah.
So it's not about us all about cost, seeing what we can get out of it. As a contractor, a building contractor, and I distinguish a building contractor from developers because they have a different model, but a contractor working for whomever, the first thing as often said is, that's too expensive. But when you ask then why, there's no response. They just know it's too expensive. So what they're saying is, my budget can't handle what you've got. So straight away, the cost comes into it. What can you do to reduce that cost? So that's why contractors are cost focused, not because we drive Ferraris. I've never driven one. I've no desire to drive one. There's certain equipment we have to have, etc. And that all costs money, so it all has to be paid for. We have training levies to pay. We have all the new technology that's coming on board. All that has to be bought and put into a building. So people don't see that. It's all those millions of people, again, that I said earlier, that are doing. They all have to be paid, and it all comes forward. And it's the contractor then that has to finally gather all that information and hand it to a client and say, here you go. And that's when it's cost. So that's, I think, probably the way I would answer that. We are all about cost. We're about cost efficiency, but we still need to make a return.
You're still a business.
We're still a business.
Just because you're construction doesn't mean you're not a business.
Exactly. And if we didn't make a profit, there'd be no taxes. And that's what fuels other things. So it's not just that. So it's a strange one about cost. But again, cost and quality.
Yeah.
There's the triangle.
I think there's
cost, quality, and
the
time.
way I look at it with my accounting hat on is, I think it'd be very easy, and I have no experience with it, but I think it would be easy in the construction industry for cost to run away with you. I think it'd be because if you talk about, man hours, time per person, if everybody's job takes that little bit longer, and there's that bit more wastage, and that happens across a few different building sites. You're not talking, you're chucking away £4 worth of timber. That £4 times by hundreds, and the labour to do that, and the waste that has to then go into, and all the recycling and requirements now you have with sites, adds up very quickly. And I think it can, if you don't keep a lid on things, and if you don't keep things in check, you risk it really running away with you very quickly.
Absolutely.
I've been to sites and seen multiple skips filled with timber offcuts and broken windows and just huge chunks of plasterboard. And one of the things we do here at the Building Performance Hub, one of the things I'm very proud of is that when we build, we try and have zero waste. I have a big stack of timber, and every time I need a piece of wood, I try my hardest never to order anything in, try and use what we have, because it's already been grown, it's already been paid for, and already reused. And I think going back to my original point, if you don't keep a lid on things, if you allow people just to chuck waste away and then bill you for it, you'll quickly come contractors. It's hundreds of thousands of pounds that quickly flows out of a project.
And I think, and then you're back to what I said earlier about collaboration and early engagement. Contractors and developers, early engagement is key, because we will look at something and say, that's an expensive way of doing it. And it's not because, again, we're trying to get something out of it. We're saying, that's an expensive. And a really good example, and on two scores actually, maybe one of what you've asked earlier, but we were building an over 55s home, and I was the project manager at the time on it, and it was a timber frame construction, which is one of my early introductions to the whole timber frame side of things. And we were putting in the piping, and the client wanted the access to the pipes, because it was social housing, and they wanted to be able to repair it. So we said, well, actually, let's think about this. That means this boxing that goes round. If ever you go into an older home, you'll see all the boxing going round, and there was great people developed systems for it to make it look neat, but it was what it was. It was boxing. The thing about that boxing is the carpenters never wanted to do it. They couldn't make money doing it. It was very time-consuming, very slow, and it wasn't necessarily making money. It was just covering their cost. So the cost of doing the boxing was disproportionate to what you actually saw, because there was 4 pieces of timber involved. It had to be scribed, it had to be cut. That was time-consuming, and therefore the cost per metre seemed excessive. But when you saw how long it took them to do it, it wasn't. They ended up walking away with the same amount of money at the end of the day as if they were hanging doors. So we said, well, how can we remove it? So we did. We found a way of removing it. And the client saved quite a bit, tens of thousands of pounds. And the aspect of the room was all the better for it. But on that same job, a client, through their project manager, introduced us to that job, and it was, and this is showing my age now, the PPC 2000 contract. And people who are watching the podcast now are throwing their heads back in horror. But he brought us in, and when I went to the very first meeting that I was engaged in, the kind of company we're going to be the contractor, we didn't tender the job. We were picked because we were already working for the client and they could see how good we were. He said, this is the scheme. I've got X amount to spend and I don't want any change. That was one of their drivers. They already knew the final account. And they said, that's what I've got. You're all responsible to deliver it. And that's what I want you to do. And we did exactly that. That job came in on the button. He didn't get any money back because that's one of his desires. But he squeezed every ounce out of that. And that was because early engagement and collaboration, and the whole team weren't looking over their shoulders, trying to say, what happens next? Will I do this? Will I do that? We made our markup on that job, as we should do. but the consultants enjoyed it. And I'm still working with kind of company, are still working with some of those consultants right now. In fact, we employ them on an award-winning scheme in Clapham.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Would you credit that with helping to change some of the mindset in the early 2000s of how the business operated? Or was it just kind of part of the natural journey that you were always heading that direction?
It sat well with me as an individual. I liked that. There was trust in there. And I speak a lot when people give me the opportunity about trust and the fact that there is such a lack of it. It takes courage to trust. And if you get burnt once, well, it's not because you did something wrong by trusting. You maybe just didn't pick the right partner to trust. And that's the difference. So my view is you pick your partner well and you trust them to do what they do in that cog in that wheel.
Yeah.
That's the key. And you let them move on from there. So I use that story because it was factual and I was heavily involved in it all the way through. So I could talk with confidence about it and say to clients, you'd say to clients now, they'd be looking at you thinking, I can't tell the contractor how much I've got to spend. And I'm thinking, well, why can't you? Because if you have 10 million to spend and you tell me you've got 9, well, then you're going to get a £9 million building. But you're going to expect a £10 million building. That's the problem. But that extra million would give you all the things you really want. And all we'll be doing to get down to that 9 million is taking things out that you'd rather stay in.
Yeah, that's a fascinating way to think about it. That's great. Let's talk quickly about education in the construction industry, because I'm keen to know from a contractor's perspective, without getting either of us sued. Contractors pay a levy to CITB on their profits, and that levy goes back into the construction education system. Do you think that process is working right now? I can go ahead and say I think yes and no. I think there's improvements to be made. We can skirt about it, but my opinion is very much like the Premier League, is that a lot of that money doesn't get back down the pyramid to the boots on the ground. It doesn't get back down to those clubs. Is that something you think we could improve on, or just generally education in the construction industry now? Because are we lacking? Are there people coming through?
Well, I mean, that's where my mind was going as you asked that question. Are there people coming through? There clearly aren't. The industry tells us that.
Yeah.
There's people leaving at the top and very little coming in at the bottom.
Have you seen the graph? We'll maybe overlay it, that shows the average age of people in construction, and before COVID and after COVID. And you can see the average age is, or the average amount of people working at certain ages is alarming. Mm-hmm. We do not have young people coming through. Are contractors concerned about that, or is that something you would naturally push on to the supply chain, or is it?
We have to be worried about it, and we have to be conscious of it. But again, pushing it onto the supply chain doesn't make it go away. Again, it's the same thing. We are now, the current government have said they want 1.5 million homes built in their parliament. I was at an event recently and there was a show of hands. It was a roundtable discussion. Can this be done? And 2 people put their hands up, and I was one of them. And the chair of the discussion was the other one. And everyone else, I think, weren't quite sure what to say. The obvious answer, because that's what the press is telling us, it'll never happen, it'll never happen. Well, it'll never happen if we keep saying it'll never happen. So we have to try. So, as I say again, God loves a trier. So you have to try. Now, whether we reach that target or not I'm kind of divorcing the thought process. The question is too binary. Will we get it? Yes or no. So if the answer is no, then you don't try. If the answer is yes, then you equally don't try, because you know you're going to get there. What I say is, I think we have to make the effort to do it, and we have to push for that. Now, bringing people into the industry is a whole different kettle of fish. The industry does need people. We obviously saw an exodus of people from the industry. I can't mention the word. Some years ago, and we're now lacking. So we need people, homegrown talent, to come into it. But the industry has to have a better perception, has to be seen better. Working conditions. People still, again, don't understand that the working conditions are better. And hence one of my passions going forward, and has been even while I was in kind of company, is the whole MMC. world, and that's something I've taken on, and I've really enjoyed seeing how that goes and what that can do for the industry. And again, we spoke earlier, and we said, well, you're trying to get someone in to the industry. How, what's their introduction to it? Well, if they're in a factory working, that's one introduction. It's still construction, and they're producing whatever system they're producing, and it leaves the factory and it goes out to the site. Well, if that house can go up quickly, then what does that give them? Then the people who are doing the fit out inside, it gives them a clean, dry environment to work in, which is different to what they would see as they drive down the street and see all the bricks and the blocks and all the rest of it, and it's wet and it's messy and it's dirty. So suddenly we're going to hand them a different environment to work in. It's almost saying, well, go inside this MMC product. Timber frame would be my preference, obviously. And now you're in the dry again. So you've left certain construction workers in the factory in the dry, and you're now given that facility, gifting it to the site to now work inside. So you're going to get people who will be more attracted to that because it's not outside. The brickies, unfortunately, and the renderers and the roofers are still going to have to work in the elements. But at least, we're minimising the people who are out in the elements. And we have to give due concern for the guys that are out there and make sure the facilities on site are good enough for them, the drying rooms and all the rest of it. But the guys inside, suddenly, dry, clean environment. Why would you not want to work then?
Yeah, and how do we get that message across? If I do talks in schools, I do a bunch of sustainability talks, and I'm an advocate for the construction industry, and I talk in a bunch of local schools. Sometimes it might be to 10 kids, sometimes it's 400 in an assembly, which, by the way, terrifying. And first thing I do, take my hat off, and I take my high vis off, and I put it in my hard hat. And to make a scene, to get their attention, I kick the hard hat across the stage. It goes absolutely miles away. You would never do that on a building site. But it gets their attention. And I deliver a whole speech about how construction industry is an iceberg, and you see 10%, but 90% of it's under. The construction industry has a monstrous budget. It has a budget for training like no other industry that I can think of. And if you want to, there's a lot of people who go, I want to be a graphic designer. Great. Let the construction industry pay for your degree. They will pay for your degree. You'll come out the other side. You'll draw pictures of pretty houses. And if you want to move on after, great. That's a different task for the construction industry to encourage you to stay. But I think once you're in your construction industry, you're hooked. If you want to be an architect, obviously, but if you want to do all sorts of weird things you never think about, you want to be a mechanic, great, JCB will take you on. If you want to be working in race cars or in NASA, all these companies, take a look at the construction industry, because you will go through the same level of education, gaining on-site skills, and you will have no debt for a substantial chunk of the industry. And the challenge I can never quite join the dots on is how I get through to those kids in the school there that actually that last 10% of the iceberg, the fitters, the brickies, the plasterers, and even when we talk about MMC, is how do we encourage them that that's a good career when the system itself, and I know a few very good friends of mine are school teachers, but in order to become school teachers, 99% of them have been through the university system. I don't know what the answer is, but we definitely need to explore that a little bit more.
I think part of the answer, and you alluded to it there, was getting that message out there, getting into the schools, and getting the career guidance people in schools to understand that there is a career. It's not just, I can't do anything else, I'll become a builder, and that's certainly not the case. If you can't do anything else, well then certainly don't pick construction, because it's a lot harder and a lot more mentally demanding than you think. But a question I've asked when I've been in a group situation and they're saying, what will my children do? So what would I advise them to do? And I says, well, what would you like them to earn? Are you looking for a high earning a career? Oh, absolutely. Yes, that's, because, so what do you, well, I'm a doctor, or I'm a solicitor, or I'm whatever it happens to be. So it's professional people. And I said, right, very good. And then when you then say to them, right, so the last time you had a problem at home, the heating wasn't working, a door was sticking, there was whatever. So what did you, yeah, gosh, the amount I had to pay them guys. I said, there you go. I said, that's the industry you want to put your child into, surely. Because you just said to me, you want to hire and yet you're able to tell me that you paid these chaps a lot of money to do something.
Yeah.
So therefore, there's a high-paying industry. Why not go into it? And the point you said, free education. Free for the end user, definitely. I mean, a kind of company, degree courses.
Well,
they come out with no debt.
Yeah.
With
and you
5
pay,
years
you pay
experience.
For it through CITB, but yeah, it's
but it's
free to the end user. Yeah.
End user gets it. So they're the sort of thing. So it is about saying to them, this is how you do it. Again, you get a lot of people that rush to the city. You know, especially in London. If you're around anywhere around London, London drags them into the city, and they sit in nice air-conditioned offices and they do their thing. You know, and it's good fun. All the things you described, but all those things exist now on site.
Yeah.
You know, and they have something. So if that insurance office, for instance, stops tomorrow, what do? Well, I know how to sell insurance. I don't know anything else. But if you're on site, you'll have life skills. You'll have other skills you can diversify with. You know, transferable skills is the expression.
I'm glad
that's the sort of thing.
You said life skills, because life skills. I didn't want to go as far as using character building, because that has a little bit of a negative connotation to it. But I would say, since joining the construction industry, my confidence was 10 times. Within weeks, I was more confident. I could speak to people because I had to. I had to get out there, and I always say, there's a lovely slide in our sound testing training, which is the hardest part of being a sound tester is convincing people that your job is more important than theirs for 6 seconds at a time, because we had to take 6-second measurements.
Yeah.
And you learn very quickly that, you know, if you're asking people to listen, I just need to take 30 seconds worth of measurements, 5 measurements, 6 times. Can I please just have a bit of silence? It's character building. You learn, you gain the confidence, you grow, and in all walks of life, in the construction industry, I think it really helps people come out of their shells. I just think it's an industry that I absolutely love, and we need to do more. And I think, CITB are out there. I'll take a lovely job going around the schools and promoting the industry, because I'd love nothing more than that. But only one school a day. So tough life.
Yeah.
I think we could have good fun doing it. I think we've got the Building Performance Hub here with 10,000 square feet of space, but I haven't had a single school come down and use the space, because it's really difficult. It's really expensive for schools to put on a coach, fill out 975 forms to get people down here, and then put them in effectively a construction environment. I don't know if you ever tried to do the same. It's really bloody difficult. Whereas I want people to come down here, and I could build them, have all the parts made out ready to build a mini house, almost MMC style. Here is a bunch of 2x4s. Here's an instruction manual. Let's build this together. You get the drill. You get on the jigsaw. You get on the chop saw. Maybe not the chop saw, but you get.
Certainly not the chop saw.
Yeah, you get on there. But we can have people using drills and impact drivers and make some noise and then see the end goal and go, right, now we're going to wrap it. And now we've got an airtight, insulated mini house. Let's push some smoke in it for a bit of theatre and teach people and show people that this is the feeling you get when you accomplish and you put something together. But trying to get the schools down here to do it and trying to take what we do and take it out to schools is really difficult.
Well, all I can say is, and again, a shameless plug for Kind of Company. Over the years, we've engaged with schools. If it's a local school to our construction site, we've engaged with them. Sometimes we've given materials to them and helped them build something. They've painted hoardings, but they've also got guided tours. And I took one, and that scheme I talked about back in the day, the sheltered unit. You know, I took it. We created a path through. We closed the site for a morning, and we had, I think, about 250 children come through in groups. And the site manager took some, I took some, and we just brought them through and said, "This is a building site." And it was a forest at that stage of timber for them to see. And we encouraged them, and I said the same things as I said to you. You know, this is industry you should get into. This is this. You know, why wouldn't you? You know, rather than to say why would you, it's why wouldn't you be in this industry? And I don't know how many of those children, because we never have the facility to track it. Yeah. But increasingly, we go to schools and we say, look, we've got an opportunity. And unfortunately for the schools, because of their curriculum demands and pressure of work, It's almost like every contractor is coming to me, offering me a chance to go and see a site. We just can't handle it. We can't deal with it. So again, I mean, that all power to the industry. We are out there trying to do that. But we have to recognise the schools have a curriculum and a timetable, and there is health and safety matters and concerns and all those things that schools have to deal with in their micro world. But it's out there, it's happening. So yes, I can understand coming to your facility would be difficult for them, but certainly for a construction site when it's 200 metres or 400 metres down the road, they should be encouraged. But we have to understand that there are demands on their time, and but that doesn't mean we couldn't go into their school. And we've some of our site managers, kind of company site managers, are fantastic at it. They're really good. They're so engaging, and some of the projects managers, and we've had great feedback from people who've, we love so and so. He was brilliant. That was just what because it was a different side to the industry. So that's maybe how maybe the CITB need to reach out to people and say, look, we're looking for, would you be willing to, etc. Double act or whatever, and go into schools and do it. And at different levels. Obviously, if you get them young, they get an idea. If you get them at GCSE level, before they start to formulate their next 2 years of education, you can then maybe have a different conversation with them, because they're a bit more adult-like at that point, and they are thinking, am I going to go to university, or shall I go and get a trade? And university will always come into their head first and trade will come second. And that's their opportunity at that point, I think, to change that round. Or at least give them level pegging.
Yeah. And at least put the facts to them honestly, fairly. Yes. Here are the known outcomes.
Yes. If not slightly biased towards construction, clearly.
Oh, yeah. Naturally. Best industry in the world. Okay, cool. Let's take it back to your days as the joint MD a kind ago. What would you say your darkest day was being a contractor? What was the hardest day you ever faced? Because you must have had some challenges over the years. There must have been days where you thought, I can't do this, or I don't want to do this anymore.
Yes, there was lots of days like that. But funny, it was never about the construction. It was about the environment that I was working in. It was the, I mentioned the word trust. It was sitting down with clients and trying to telling them what's happening, and knowing, in some instances anyway, them looking back saying, you're just another contractor telling me a story. And I go, but that's questioning me, because I'm sitting here in front of you telling you this, and I passionately believe it. And it could be, often it's a delay, unfortunately, and that because of weather, or because of design, or because the project wasn't ready to go to site. But yes, other pressures externally meant we were on site, and we're then trying to mop this up. And I'm saying, give me a chance. That's what I need. This is where we're at. And they were. I would come back from sites on that in particular, and it would be. I said, I don't know why I'm doing this. I need to get out of this. I need to do something else. And then I think, the next day I wake up and I shrug it off and I say, let's crack on again.
I think there's a whole nother podcast, probably already one exists, but there's a whole nother conversation about the pressures of being in the hot seat. And it doesn't matter if you're the CEO of a monstrous organization or the MD of a small 3-person company. The pressure you feel sometimes is immense. And at that point, I think sometimes the banks give out this lovely adverts and the marketing and, we're here for you. They are not always there for you. When we've needed it here, I mean, we took this place on, boom, pandemic. We're a business that was designed to bring people together during a pandemic. Madness. And when we needed the bank, when we went to them, they weren't there. I won't name them in case I need them in the future. But and that there's a feeling you'll get, and you'll probably understand, and the people that your joint MD and the people that are now following up on you, the way you go, oh my word, I'm going to have to pay myself or not pay myself this month in order to make these things happen. All the time, you've got to sit in your office and put a smile on your face when someone's complaining they don't have any pencils in their pencil case, and the little things to them.
But that's belief in if you don't have belief in the organisation you're in, then leave.
Absolutely.
That's what that comes down to. It's pure belief.
Yeah, and we knew we were going to turn it around. I knew there was a forecast. There's a cash flow forecast, and we just, this is a small situation at a small time. But you never let the team know. You got to keep that smile on your face, and as a kind of somebody in charge of operating a business, a big business, those are the things we never, people like us, we never talk about, and we probably should a lot more.
Yeah, well, yes, but there is steadying the ship. If the captain is running around looking stressed all the time and worried, well, then that's going to translate down to everybody else.
Absolutely.
So your job is part of your job, and like hanging a door is carpenter's job. Part of your job is managing that process, and shielding them from it in an appropriate way, and not just be cavalier about it and say, "Oh well, we'll see what happens when it happens." And again, at that same round table, I gave out some statistics which were frightening, and I looked them up. So 2004. So 2004, the amount of people who went bust, over 4,000 in the construction, and of 1,600 of those were specialists.
Yeah.
And that was 7% more than the year previously. So let's make maths easy. That's 8,000 businesses. And if they were all one-man business, that's 8,000 people. But they weren't. They were bigger than that. They're gone. So how do we get them back? Because they all had a part to play in the supply chain that we're now needed to build 1.5 million pound homes.
Yeah.
So we need those people. Where you look at it like that, and then you then see, and again, I wouldn't name them because it wouldn't be appropriate, but you see people saying that we are a contractor and we've made 2% gross profit. So when you have things like that, and then you say to clients, I need to make a profit, and that all adds up to this cost that comes in to do this project, to survive. This is, and the professionals involved, pay people an appropriate to get the quality.
Yeah.
And without you asking me the question, I feel duty bound to say this. It's those cogs in the wheel. If everybody plays their part correctly, the end result is better for everybody. We don't
Absolutely.
no one has to scrimp. No one has to cut corners. Everyone gets to do it right. And that does not mean that it's going to be more expensive. It means that you're giving everyone the opportunity to engage early, to collaborate, which is what we said the industry is lacking, what the industry is being told to do. And then you'll get to the right figure. Now, that right figure might not be to your budget, but that's a separate question. Does that mean that the budget isn't right? Or does it mean the cost is wrong? At the moment, it's always the cost is wrong. And there's an open conversation, and that's a podcast. If you get some of the commissioners and the check signers in your podcast, it would be interesting to see what they say. And again, a shameful plug for me going forward. Why I always wanted to go, not always, but I understood the MMC has got a part to play because we're taking out risk.
Yeah.
For site.
Risk was my next question.
I thought you mentioned risk to me earlier. Yes.
So risk is something. The first time I really considered risk from your point of view is actually your team had invited me to a nice dinner in Brighton. I think.
In Brighton, yes, at the housing conference in Brighton. Yes.
Yeah, it was
great place.
Really, and it was really interesting to hear. It was actually a really cool thing that you guys do, or kind of co-do, because you're engaging, you're talking. What you're asking opinions. It's a lovely little dinner, and you had mentioned specifically about construction risk, and I hadn't really ever thought about it, and the fact that you would need a line in your budget for risk, and it got me. I actually went away from that, and that was one of the key things I took away, and did a bunch of reading up on it. So, what is it that we can reduce risk? We all know we can reduce risk, but we still need to account for it. So how do you assess risk in a construction business? Is it just a gut feel? Is it a percentage? Is it something you just but you're going to have to spend some money there? Is risk just another word for kind of another pot that you can jump into?
Oh dear.
Now we're getting into it.
Yeah.
We don't have to go too far, but
there's another podcast there, right? Yeah. So there's a phrase in the industry now. It wasn't there back in the day, but is now. It's design development. I've said, what does that mean? There's no such thing. You've either designed it or you haven't. And then you say, oh no, it's design development. But you've allowed for that, haven't you? And this is when it's a D&B contract. So our design and build contract. So I'm saying, well, no, you've designed the building. We've allowed to build what you've designed. So I don't need any. Why do I need to put money in? So are you telling me you haven't designed the building? No, I've designed it. Fine. Well, in that case, then I don't need it, do I? But there'll be some development. So I'm saying the development has to happen on the paper. The development should happen before it gets to us. We are a contractor. Again, I distinguish between developers and contractors. The contractor is there to build what's being designed. We're not designers. We were never intended to be designers. That's why architects go to university for 7 years to become a designer. Engineers go to university to become engineering designers. That's what they do. When it comes to us, we put all those component parts, the brain surgery, we put it all together, and we build it and we hand it to our client. There you go. But this, and I'd like to think it's fading out. And again, sadly, it took Grenfell maybe to get to that point where design build contracts are seen for what they are. It's nobody at the beginning, or very few at the beginning, do their job to the best of their ability. They do it to a cost and they hand it out. And they keep handing it down, the responsibility further down and down the line. So the guy who's painting the wall is almost this guy responsible for the design because it just flows down through money and a lack of it. So when I'm sitting there and I used to settle all the tenders and I'd be saying, right, what do I do? And I would put risk in. And design and build contracts meant risk. So because I knew there was gaps. They might not be obvious in some cases. Other cases they were blatantly obvious, and you'd have to just come up with a figure. And it's a dark art, but everyone has to do it. But if it was designed, if we went to the way if the RIBA stood up and actually designed things to their code that they say, and say to clients, no, we will not shortcut the system. This is the system, and we will design it, and here it is. Now go and build that. We don't have to put that in. And there used to be a thing called a bill of quantities. And I've, again, promoted the quantity surveyors in the world, where I used to say that pass your building through the sieve of a quantity surveyor. Because if quantity surveyors knew construction, they understood it, they were taught construction, they would go through it, they would say, oh, I've got to this point, if I can't measure it, that means it's not designed. So Mr. Architect or Mr. Engineer or Mr. M&E, what did you want here? Oh, we'll sort that out on site. No, I've got to actually measure it because I'm producing a bill of quantities and I need to know what that is so I can measure it so that I can get the contractor to price it. So when we used to price bills of quantities, we didn't put in risk because they said, this is what I want, price that, we'll have a look at the 2 or 3 if we went to tender and we will decide who we're going to go with. That's where it should be. And I'd like to see that it gets back. And if we get rid of the D&B contract, then I think we will get back to something like that. But it needs education because the whole quantity surveying world has broken into the cost consultants now, and it's square meters, and it's removed slightly from where it should be. But I think there's to get back to that, I think would help. Yeah. And that would mean that on site we won't have delays because we'll be handed a set of drawings that will actually be able to build to. And again, back to the gateways in the Building Safety Act. I know Gateway 1 is all about fire and it's making sure that there's a fire strategy, and if I recognise that, we must have some. And not to change, we want your fire strategy well thought out at Gateway 1 or you don't go to planning. And Gateway 2, we want your job fully designed and we want to know the products you're using, and then products are baked into the system, and then we'll get the contractor on site. So suddenly all these 7 years and these great minds, hugely better than me, are now thinking this through, and they're seeing, why are we letting jobs go on site when information isn't there, when the design isn't done, when it's not thought through? Well, what does that lead to? It leads to problems, and in the case of that, it led to deaths. So we're now saying, no, we want this information. There is a resistance in the industry, I think, and that's not necessarily that I'm sure contractors and clients alike are wondering, how do we deal with this? But that's because it's something we're now being forced to do, and we're in the process of figuring out how that's going to happen. How do we best work with that? And that's for 18 metres and above. It's going to come down to 11 metres in the not too distant. And when it gets there, it's effectively every building. Yeah. But why would you not do that in every building? Why would you not give the correct components and the correct information to someone to go and do it? It makes all the sense in the world that that's what you'd want to do, and that's what you do. And if you do that, you will get a product at the end exactly what you expected. Yeah, it won't be something else. But that's a very strange theory at the moment.
Yeah. If a screw falls out of an aeroplane, they can tell you where it came from, the materials that went in it, who installed it.
Absolutely.
But I wouldn't be able to tell you who installed the solar panels in this building.
Well, there you go. And were they suitably qualified to do it? Or did
No
they just
idea.
turn up
Yeah.
and say, I'm here, Gov, I'll nip up in your roof, don't
Yeah.
worry about me?
I've got no idea. This is now concerning. It's the structure of the building. No idea who put up the steel frame. Great. Okay, well, I'm taking up an absolute chunk of your time. So I'm going to jump on to the 3 questions that I ask everybody. Question number 1. What do the words building performance mean to you?
Building performance. I think probably slightly different to yourself, as in the performance of a building. I would say building performance is about the people in the industry and how they perform to produce the end result.
Okay.
If they do it well, if they do it together, and they all do it within their skill set, then you have a building that performs. And that's really, I think that it's a very open.
I like that.
I'm not quite sure how else to answer it. And that includes everybody. That includes the guys in the ivory towers, as I was, to the guys who are sweeping the floor. You know, they all have to do their part. They all play their part. And that gives you a building that performs.
Fascinating. No, I love that every time we ask people this, it's different. Every single person thinks of it differently, which means it's either a genius idea to call this the Building Performance Hub or a terrible idea because there's no actual definition, which always makes me chuckle. Okay, question number 2. Who is inspiring you right now?
Who is inspiring me? Well, now that I've got time to read a lot more than I did and listen to podcasts, which are just everywhere on every topic.
We've all got one.
Yes, indeed. But and some are better than others, but certainly more informative. And I think the inspiration right now, because I'm focused on that, or it's something that I've time to focus on, is what's happening in the MMC world. Mark Farmer, I think I've great sympathy for him because he's been the champion. He's been held up. He's been given loads of grief, but yet he still stays with it, and he still champions what needs to happen. I believe in that. I'm a big fan of MMC. I think it's certainly going to help us. We know we can build quicker using MMC methods. And that's one of the goals that the government want. They've put out some funding to back SME contractors and developers to do just that. So, my belief in it and the inspiration I'm taking from it is I think is well founded because now the government and other people are going that way. We just need to get there a little bit quicker, I think, because there are products out there already in existence that can deliver what we need.
Great. Okay, and the very last question. If you could click your fingers and change one thing in the construction industry right now, what would it be and why?
It already exists, what I'd like to see, and that's the Building Safety Act. The click of my fingers is that everyone, and that's from the top right to the bottom, takes it seriously. It's a game changer for the industry. What they have assessed and what they've gone through and what they have now come out and said, as I said with the gateways, that is bringing us, it's almost back to the future.
Yeah.
Because we did that. We used to do that. And now we have the opportunity to actually grab hold of it and make it work going forward. And so it's my wish is there. Someone's already done it for me. But my click of my fingers is making everyone actually sit up and do it.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thanks so much for coming down. Thanks so much for being on the podcast. I'll take that you decided to join this one as an endorsement that you think this is a good one.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You heard it here first. Thanks so much, and don't be a stranger.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Okay.